The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan penthouse as Victoria Sterling paced across the Persian rug, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. At 28, she controlled a media empire worth $12 billion, yet tonight she felt more vulnerable than a teenager asking someone to prom. "This is insane, Victoria," she muttered to herself, checking her reflection in the antique mirror. Absolutely insane. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. "Elena Rosewood just arrived at the coffee shop. She's at the corner table reading a book." Victoria's heart skipped. Elena Rosewood, the woman who had unknowingly turned her world upside down 3 weeks ago at a charity event downtown. While Victoria had been giving her rehearsed speech about corporate responsibility to a room full of Manhattan's elite, Elena had been serving coffee in the back, completely oblivious to the effect she was having on the most powerful woman in the room. It wasn't just Elena's natural beauty that captivated Victoria, though her warm, honey-colored eyes and infectious laugh had certainly caught her attention. It was the way Elena had comforted an elderly volunteer who'd spilled coffee on her dress, the genuine kindness in her voice when she'd helped a lost child find his mother, the way she'd declined tips with a smile that could light up Times Square. Victoria had spent the last 3 weeks having Elena quietly investigated, not in a creepy way, she told herself, but in a protective way. Elena worked 2 jobs, mornings at Sunrise Cafe in Brooklyn and evenings cleaning offices in Queens. She lived in a tiny studio apartment, sent most of her paycheck to her sick mother in Puerto Rico, and somehow still volunteered at the local animal shelter on Sundays. Everything about Elena was the opposite of Victoria's calculated world of mergers, acquisitions, and power lunches. And that's exactly why Victoria couldn't stop thinking about her. The elevator dinged, announcing Victoria's arrival at the ground floor. Her driver, Marcus, was already waiting with the umbrella. "The usual cafe, Miss Sterling?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Actually, no. Sunrise Cafe in Brooklyn." "And Marcus? This stays between us." 20 minutes later, Victoria stood outside the small cafe, watching through rain-streaked windows as Elena wiped down tables with the same care she'd seen her use when handling delicate china at the charity event. She was wearing jeans and a simple green sweater that somehow made her look more elegant than any woman Victoria had ever seen in couture. Taking a deep breath, Victoria pushed open the door. The bell chimed softly, and Elena looked up with that radiant smile that had been haunting Victoria's dreams. "Good evening. You're just in time. We close in 15 minutes, but I can still make you something," Elena said, not recognizing the billionaire who'd been watching her from afar. "Actually," Victoria said, her usual confidence wavering slightly, "I'm not here for coffee. I'm here for you." Elena's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Excuse me?" Victoria approached the counter, noting how Elena's hand stilled on the dish towel she'd been holding. "My name is Victoria Sterling. I saw you at the Children's Hospital charity event 3 weeks ago, and I have a proposition for you." "Sterling, as in Sterling Media?" Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're that Victoria Sterling? Guilty as charged." Victoria smiled, trying to appear less intimidating than her net worth suggested. "I need your help with something, and I'm prepared to offer you more money than you've probably ever seen." Elena took a step back, her defenses rising. "Look, I don't know what kind of help you think I can provide, but a week in the Maldives?" Victoria interrupted, her words tumbling out faster than she'd intended. 7 days at my private resort, all expenses paid plus $50,000 just for your time." The dish towel slipped from Elena's hands. 50,000? "I have a series of important business meetings with international investors. They're old-fashioned, traditional. They trust people who appear settled, stable. I need someone to accompany me, to play the role of..." Victoria paused, searching for the right words. "Your girlfriend?" Elena's voice was barely audible. "My partner, in the business sense," Victoria clarified quickly, though the word girlfriend sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. Nothing inappropriate would happen. Separate rooms, completely professional. Just dinners, a few social events, maybe some beach time between meetings. Elena stared at her, processing the surreal situation. Why me? You could hire anyone. A professional, actress, a model. Victoria looked directly into Elena's eyes, and for a moment, her billionaire facade cracked. Because when I watched you at that charity event, you were the only person in the room who seemed genuinely happy. Everyone else was performing, including me. You were just you. The cafe fell silent except for the gentle patter of rain against the windows. Elena's mind raced with possibilities. The money could pay for her mother's surgery, could get her out of debt, could change everything. But something about Victoria Sterling's intense gaze made her feel like this was about more than just business. What's the catch? Elena asked. No catch. Just 7 days of your time. Think of it as the world's most expensive vacation. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her mother's doctor about scheduling another expensive treatment. The timing felt like fate, or perhaps a test. I need to think about it, Elena said finally. Victoria nodded, pulling out an elegant business card. My private number is on the back. The jet leaves tomorrow at 8 p.m. from Teterboro Airport. If you decide to come, just show up. If not, she shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant despite the fact that her heart was hammering against her ribs. As Victoria turned to leave, Elena called out, Miss Sterling? Why does this feel like you're not telling me everything? Victoria paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Because I'm not, she said softly. But maybe that's a conversation for the Maldives. The door closed behind her, leaving Elena alone with the most important decision of her life and exactly 18 hours to make it. Elena stood in front of her cracked bathroom mirror at 6:47 a.m., holding Victoria Sterling's business card like it might disappear if she blinked too hard. She'd been awake all night, alternating between packing a small suitcase and unpacking it again, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. Mommy, you sound different today. Her mother's voice crackled through the phone from San Juan. What's wrong, mi amor? Elena closed her eyes, listening to the slight wheeze in her mother's breathing that had gotten worse over the past month. Nothing's wrong, Mommy. Actually, something incredible might be happening, but I need to ask you something crazy. Crazier than you working yourself to death in New York? Much crazier. Elena took a deep breath. What would you say if I told you I might go away for a week with someone I barely know, to a place I've never been, for more money than we've ever dreamed of? There was a long pause. Elena Rosa Rosewood, are you in some kind of trouble? No, Mommy, the opposite, actually. Elena found herself smiling for the first time in hours. I think I might be in some kind of miracle. 3 hours later, Elena stood outside Teterboro Airport, her hands shaking as she clutched a borrowed suitcase and her passport. She'd called in sick to both jobs, left her apartment key with her neighbor Mrs. Chen, and withdrawn her last $100 from the ATM for cab fare. The private jet gleamed like a silver bullet against the gray October sky. Elena had seen pictures of planes like this in magazines, but standing next to one felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. Miss Rosewood? A uniformed flight attendant approached with a warm smile. Miss Sterling is waiting for you aboard. Elena's legs felt like jelly as she climbed the stairs. The interior was more luxurious than most people's homes. Cream leather seats, polished wood panels, and a small dining area that probably cost more than Elena's annual rent. Victoria stood near the window, wearing tailored khaki pants and a white linen shirt that made her look like she'd stepped out of a travel magazine. When she turned and saw Elena, her face lit up with what looked like genuine relief. You came, Victoria said softly. I came, Elena replied, still processing that she was actually here, though I'm still not entirely sure why. Victoria gestured to the seat across from her as the flight attendant took Elena's bag. Maybe because sometimes the universe puts opportunities in front of us that are too important to ignore. Or maybe because my mother needs surgery and $50,000 is more money than I'll see in 5 years, Elena said, settling into the incredibly soft leather seat. Always the practical one, Victoria smiled, but there was something wistful in her expression. I like that about you. Elena studied Victoria's face, noting the slight tension around her eyes. You're nervous. Why would someone like you be nervous about a business trip? Victoria was quiet for a moment as the plane began to taxi. Because this isn't really just about business, is it? The honesty in Victoria's voice made Elena's breath catch. What do you mean? I mean that 3 weeks ago I watched you comfort a stranger who spilled coffee on her dress, and I haven't been able to think about anything else since. I mean that I've built an empire by making calculated decisions, and inviting you on this trip is the most uncalculated thing I've ever done. Elena felt her cheeks flush. Victoria. I know how this sounds, Victoria continued, her words coming faster now. I know you must think I'm some entitled billionaire who's used to getting whatever she wants, and maybe that's partly true. But Elena, when I saw you that night, it wasn't your appearance that stopped me in my tracks, it was your kindness, your authenticity, the way you treated everyone like they mattered. The plane lifted off, and Elena watched New York shrink below them, feeling like she was leaving her old life behind with every foot of altitude. So what happens now? Elena asked. In the Maldives, I mean. What exactly are you expecting from me? Victoria reached across the small table between them, her fingers barely brushing Elena's hand. I'm expecting you to be yourself. That's all I've wanted from the moment I saw you. Elena looked down at their almost touching hands, feeling electricity spark between them. And the business meetings? The investors who need to see you as settled? They're real, Victoria said. But Elena, I need you to know something. If at any point during this week you feel uncomfortable, if you want to leave, if this becomes something you don't want, all you have to do is say the word. The money is yours regardless. I'll have you on the next flight home, no questions asked. Elena met Victoria's eyes, seeing vulnerability there that she suspected few people ever got to witness. What if I don't want to leave? Victoria's breath hitched almost imperceptibly. Then we'll figure out what that means when we get there. The flight attendant appeared with champagne and a selection of Elena's favorite foods. Somehow, Victoria had discovered, she loved chocolate croissants and fresh strawberries. How did you know? Elena asked, biting into the perfect pastry. I may have done some research, Victoria admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. I wanted you to feel comfortable. Research or stalking? Elena teased, surprised by her own boldness. Thorough interest in your well-being, Victoria replied with a grin that transformed her entire face. As they flew over the Atlantic, Elena found herself relaxing for the first time in months. Victoria was nothing like she'd expected, not cold or demanding, but funny and surprisingly self-deprecating. She told stories about disastrous board meetings and confessed to being secretly terrified of butterflies. Butterflies? Elena laughed. You control a $12 billion company, but you're afraid of butterflies? They're unpredictable, Victoria protested. You never know which direction they're going to go. Kind of like this whole situation, Elena said without thinking. Victoria's laughter faded to a gentle smile. Exactly like this situation. 14 hours later, Elena stepped off the plane into the warm Maldivian night, her senses immediately overwhelmed by the scent of frangipani and the sound of gentle waves. The private resort stretched out before them like something from a dream, overwater bungalows connected by wooden walkways, all of it bathed in soft golden light. Elena, Victoria said as they stood on the dock, welcome to paradise. Elena turned to look at Victoria, backlit by the tropical sunset, and realized that somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, her life had changed completely. The question now was whether she was brave enough to see where it would lead. Elena woke to the sound of gentle waves lapping against the stilts of her overwater bungalow, sunlight filtering through sheer curtains that cost more than her monthly salary. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back with the force of a tsunami. She was in the Maldives, with Victoria Sterling, playing a role she didn't fully understand yet. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Elena, are you awake? Victoria's voice carried through the mahogany door, accompanied by the aroma of fresh coffee and something deliciously sweet. Elena wrapped herself in the provided silk robe, Even the bathrobes here were luxurious, and opened the door to find Victoria balancing a breakfast tray, looking effortlessly elegant in a flowing sundress that matched the turquoise water beyond. "I thought you might be hungry," Victoria said, her eyes taking in Elena's tousled hair and sleepy expression with an appreciation she tried to hide. "The first meeting isn't until this afternoon, so we have time to prepare." Elena stepped aside to let Victoria in, acutely aware of how intimate this felt, sharing breakfast in her bedroom while wearing nothing but silk. "Prepare how exactly?" Victoria set the tray on the small table by the window and pulled out a chair for Elena. "Well, if we're going to convince the Nakamura group that we're a couple, we should probably know a few basic things about each other. Like how we met, how long we've been together, what we love about each other." Elena nearly choked on her first sip of coffee. "We're pretending to be a couple? I thought this was about appearing stable and settled." "It is," Victoria said, though her cheeks flushed slightly. "But Hiroshi Nakamura is very traditional. He believes business partnerships should reflect personal partnerships. He's brought his wife of 30 years to every deal I've ever seen him make." Elena set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "Victoria, I don't know if I can do this. I've never been a good liar, and pretending to be in love with someone I barely know." "Then don't pretend." Victoria's voice was so quiet Elena had to lean forward to hear her. "Just be yourself. Be the woman who volunteers at animal shelters on Sundays, who sends most of her paycheck to her mother, who lights up a room without even realizing it." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You really did do research on me." "I told you, thorough interest in your well-being." Victoria smiled, then grew serious. "Elena, I need you to know something. If this makes you uncomfortable, if at any point you want to change the arrangement, just say so. We can tell them you're my business consultant, my personal assistant, anything you prefer." Elena studied Victoria's face, seeing genuine concern there. "What would be easier for you? For your business deal?" "What would be easier for you?" Victoria countered. "That's what matters to me." Something in Victoria's tone made Elena's breath catch. She looked out at the crystal clear water, then back at Victoria. "Okay, let's say we're together. How long?" Victoria's face lit up with relief. 6 months. Long enough to be serious, not so long that people would expect more permanent arrangements. "And how did we meet?" Victoria grinned mischievously. "At a charity event. You were volunteering, I was giving a speech, and I was so distracted by you that I completely lost my train of thought mid-sentence." Elena laughed, despite her nerves. "That's actually not far from the truth, is it?" "Not far at all." Victoria's eyes sparkled. "What's your favorite thing about me?" "I don't know you well enough to have a favorite thing," Elena said honestly. "Then make something up. Something believable." Elena tilted her head, studying Victoria's face in the morning light. "Your eyes," she said finally. "They change color depending on your mood. Right now they're more green than blue, which means you're nervous but trying not to show it." Victoria's hand stilled on her coffee cup. "That's remarkably observant. What's your favorite thing about me?" Elena asked, turning the question around. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving from Elena's eyes to her lips and back again. "Your laugh," she said softly. "It's completely genuine. I don't think you know how to fake anything, Elena. It's refreshing in my world." The air between them felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Elena cleared her throat and reached for a piece of tropical fruit. "So what time is this meeting?" 2 o'clock on the main terrace. Victoria seemed to shake herself back to business mode. "I had my assistant send over some clothes for you. Different sizes, different styles, whatever you're comfortable in." Elena followed Victoria's gesture toward the walk-in closet, gasping, when she saw it filled with beautiful dresses, shoes, and accessories. "Victoria, this is too much. I can't accept all of this." "It's not a gift," Victoria said quickly. "It's a costume. For the role you're playing. Think of it as method acting." Elena ran her fingers over a flowing green dress that probably cost more than her car. And after this week? After this week, you keep whatever you want and donate the rest or sell it or burn it in a ceremonial bonfire if that makes you feel better, Victoria said with a laugh. I just want you to feel confident this afternoon. 3 hours later, Elena barely recognized herself in the full-length mirror. The green dress fit perfectly, bringing out the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and the subtle makeup made her look like she belonged in Victoria's world. Victoria appeared in the mirror behind her, stunning in a navy blue dress that hugged her curves perfectly. You look, Victoria started, then stopped, seeming to lose her words. Different, Elena supplied. Beautiful, Victoria finished. You look beautiful, though you looked beautiful in your cafe uniform too. Elena turned to face Victoria, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Are we going to be able to pull this off? Victoria reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind Elena's ear, the gesture so natural and intimate that Elena's breath hitched. Just follow my lead, Victoria whispered, and remember, we're supposed to be in love. As they walked hand in hand toward the main terrace, Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. The problem wasn't going to be pretending to be in love with Victoria Sterling. The problem was going to be pretending it was all an act. The Nakamura group was already seated at the beautifully appointed table overlooking the lagoon, an elegant older couple who radiated the kind of quiet confidence that comes from decades of successful business partnerships. Hiroshi Nakamura stood as they approached, his wife Akiko following suit with a warm smile. Victoria-san? Hiroshi bowed slightly. And this must be the special woman we've heard so much about. Elena felt Victoria's hand tighten slightly in hers as Victoria smiled. Hiroshi, Akiko, I'd like you to meet Elena Rosewood, the love of my life. The love of my life. The words hung in the tropical air like a spell, and Elena felt her cheeks burn as Akiko Nakamura's knowing smile widened. For a moment, Elena forgot this was supposed to be acting. How wonderful, Akiko said in accented English, clasping her hands together. Young love is so beautiful to witness. Tell me, Elena-san, how did you capture the heart of such a powerful woman? Elena's mind went completely blank. She looked at Victoria, panic flashing in her eyes. But Victoria squeezed her hand reassuringly. Actually, Victoria interjected, smoothly, Elena captured my heart by completely ignoring the fact that I'm powerful. She saw right through all the corporate armor to the person underneath. Hiroshi chuckled as they all took their seats around the elegantly set table. Ah, a woman who is not impressed by wealth. Very wise. My Akiko was the same way when we met 43 years ago. I was just a young businessman with big dreams and empty pockets. Empty pockets and terrible haircut, Akiko added with a laugh, patting her husband's hand affectionately. Elena watched the easy intimacy between the older couple and felt a pang of something she couldn't identify. How did you know he was the one? She asked Akiko, genuinely curious. He made me laugh during a typhoon, Akiko replied. We were trapped in a small cafe in Kyoto, rain pounding the windows, and instead of complaining, he started telling me silly stories about his childhood. I realized then that a man who could find joy in a storm was a man I could weather any storm with. Victoria looked at Elena with an expression so tender that Elena almost forgot they were performing. Elena does the same thing for me, Victoria said softly. She finds light in the darkest places. The conversation flowed naturally as they enjoyed the exquisite lunch, fresh seafood, tropical fruits, and delicate pastries that melted on the tongue. Elena found herself relaxing, charmed by the Nakamura's obvious affection for each other and surprised by how easy it was to talk with them. Elena-san, Hiroshi said as they finished the main course. Victoria tells us you work with children's charities. That is noble work. Elena nearly choked on her water. She'd never mentioned children's charities. That must have been part of Victoria's fictional backstory for her. Yes, it's very rewarding work, she managed. Our daughter runs a foundation for underprivileged children in Tokyo, Akiko added. Perhaps you two could collaborate in the future. Elena felt Victoria's hand find hers under the table, offering silent support. "I'd love that," Elena said, and realized she meant it. As the business portion of the lunch began, Elena listened, in fascination as Victoria presented her expansion plans for Sterling Media's Asian markets. She watched Victoria transform from the vulnerable woman who'd nervously brought her breakfast to a confident CEO who commanded respect through intelligence and vision, rather than intimidation. "Your proposal is impressive, Victoria-san," Hiroshi said after Victoria finished her presentation. "But I must ask, how do you balance such ambitious business goals with personal happiness? In my experience, one often suffers for the other." Victoria was quiet for a moment, and Elena could see her carefully considering her response. "It's been a challenge," Victoria admitted. "Until recently, I thought I had to choose between success and love. Elena taught me that the right person doesn't ask you to choose. They become part of your strength." Elena's heart skipped. Victoria was looking directly at her as she spoke, and the intensity in her eyes made Elena wonder if they were still acting. "And you, Elena-san?" Akiko asked. "How do you handle loving someone whose time is so in demand?" Elena felt all eyes on her and realized this was her moment to either support Victoria's deal or accidentally sabotage it. She thought about Victoria's nervousness that morning, the care with which she'd chosen Elena's clothes, the way she'd made sure Elena felt comfortable every step of the way. "Victoria makes time for what matters to her," Elena said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "She may run board meetings and close billion-dollar deals, but she also remembers that I like chocolate croissants and fresh strawberries. She notices when I'm tired, when I'm worried about my mother, when I need to laugh. Success means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with." Victoria's eyes widened slightly, and Elena saw something shift in her expression. Surprise, gratitude, and something deeper that made Elena's pulse quicken. Hiroshi nodded approvingly. "This is wisdom. Akiko, what do you think?" Akiko studied both women carefully, her gaze moving between Victoria and Elena, with the perception of someone who'd been married for over 4 decades. "I think," she said, slowly, "that these two women have found something very special, whether they fully realize it yet or not." After the Nakamuras left to rest before the evening's dinner, Victoria and Elena found themselves alone on the terrace, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. "That was incredible," Victoria said, still holding Elena's hand from their performance. "You were perfect, natural. I couldn't have asked for a better partner," Elena suggested when Victoria trailed off. "Yes," Victoria said softly. "Partner." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. Elena was acutely aware of Victoria's thumb, tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "Victoria," Elena said finally, "when you said I taught you that the right person becomes part of your strength, were you still acting?" Victoria turned to face her, and Elena saw vulnerability in her eyes that had nothing to do with business deals or performances. "Were you?" Victoria asked quietly. "When you said I notice when you're worried about your mother," Elena felt her heart hammering. "You do notice. You had my favorite breakfast ready this morning. You made sure I felt comfortable. I've been thinking about you for 3 weeks," Victoria interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not about this deal, not about the business advantages. About you, Elena. About the way you laugh, the way you care about people, the way you make me feel like maybe I'm not as alone as I thought I was." Elena stepped closer, drawn by the honesty in Victoria's voice. "What are we doing here, Victoria?" "I don't know," Victoria admitted. "I planned this whole elaborate charade to spend time with you, but Elena, what I'm feeling, this isn't acting anymore." Before Elena could respond, Victoria's phone buzzed with an urgent message. Victoria glanced at it and sighed. "I have to take this call. Rain check on this conversation?" Elena nodded, watching Victoria walk away to take her call. As she stood alone on the terrace, Elena realized that somewhere between the breakfast, in her room, and the lunch with the Nakamuras, the line between performance and reality had completely disappeared. The question now was whether Victoria felt the same way, or if Elena was falling for someone who might still be acting. Elena found Victoria an hour later, pacing frantically on the beach behind their bungalows, her elegant dress hiked up as she walked barefoot through the sand. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and even from a distance, Elena could hear the tension in her voice. "No, David, you listen to me. I don't care what the Shanghai office thinks. We're not selling to Meridian Corp, not now, not ever." Victoria's free hand raked through her perfectly styled hair. "Because James Crawford is a snake who would destroy everything my father built just to add another zero to his portfolio." Elena hesitated, unsure whether to approach or give Victoria privacy. The decision was made for her when Victoria looked up and saw her, relief flooding her features. "Handle it," Victoria said into the phone. "Whatever it takes. I'll be back in New York in 3 days." She hung up and closed her eyes, taking a deep breath of the sea air. "Bad news?" Elena asked gently, settling into the sand beside Victoria. Victoria let out a bitter laugh. "The worst. My ex-fiancé is trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover of my company while I'm here playing house in paradise." Elena's stomach dropped. "Ex-fiancé?" "James Crawford. We were engaged 2 years ago." Victoria stared out at the water, her jaw. "Curse him, I thought I loved him. Turns out he was more interested in merging our companies than merging our lives. When I found out he was planning to absorb Sterling Media into his empire and fire half my employees, I ended things. Apparently, he's decided to try a more direct approach." Elena processed this information, feeling a strange mix of jealousy and protectiveness. "Can he actually do that, take over your company?" "If he gets enough shareholders on his side, yes." Victoria's voice was hollow. "And right now, while I'm here, instead of fighting him in boardrooms and backrooms, he's probably charming every investor I've ever known." Elena watched Victoria's profile, seeing the weight of responsibility and fear in her expression. "Then why are you still here?" Victoria turned to look at her, and Elena saw something vulnerable and desperate in her eyes. "Because 3 days ago, I was willing to sacrifice everything for a business deal with the Nakamuras. But sitting at that lunch today, watching you handle their questions like you were born to be in my world, seeing the way you looked at me when I talked about finding strength in the right person." Victoria's voice broke slightly. "Elena, for the first time in my life, I don't want to choose business over everything else." Elena felt her heart hammering. "Victoria, I know this is crazy," Victoria continued, standing up and brushing sand from her dress. "I know you came here for the money for your mother's medical bills. I know this whole week has been one elaborate lie. But Elena, what I feel for you isn't a lie, and I can't go back to New York and fight James Crawford knowing I might lose you in the process." Elena stood too, stepping closer to Victoria. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe some things are more important than empire building." Victoria's voice was barely audible over the sound of the waves. "Maybe some things are worth the risk." Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her mother's doctor in San Juan, and Elena's blood turned to ice. "I have to take this," she said, answering quickly. "Dr. Martinez, is everything okay?" Victoria watched Elena's face pale as she listened to the doctor. Elena's hand began to shake, and Victoria instinctively stepped closer, offering silent support. "How long do we have?" Elena asked, her voice cracking. "And how much will it cost?" Victoria could only hear one side of the conversation, but Elena's expression told her everything she needed to know. Something was very wrong. "I understand," Elena said finally. I'll figure something out. Thank you for calling." Elena hung up and stared at her phone, tears threatening to spill over. "Elena, what is it?" Victoria asked gently. "My mother's condition is worse than they thought. The surgery needs to happen immediately, not next month like we planned." "And the cost?" Elena's voice broke. "It's not $50,000 anymore. It's $300,000. For a procedure that might not even work." Victoria didn't hesitate. "I'll transfer the money tonight." Elena looked up sharply. Victoria, no, that's not why I'm telling you this. I know it's not. That's exactly why I'm offering. Victoria cupped Elena's face gently. Elena, you flew across the world with a stranger to help your mother. You've spent this entire week pretending to be someone you're not for her sake. Let me help you. You can't just throw that kind of money around because of... Elena gestured helplessly between them. Because of whatever this is between us. Can't I? Victoria's thumb traced Elena's cheekbone. Elena, I've spent $12 billion building an empire, but I've never spent money on anything that mattered as much as this does. Elena closed her eyes, leaning into Victoria's touch despite herself. Your company is being attacked. James Crawford is trying to destroy everything you've worked for. You need to be in New York fighting for your life's work, not here playing fairy godmother to someone you barely know. I know everything I need to know about you, Victoria said fiercely. I know you work 3 jobs to support your family. I know you volunteer at animal shelters because you can't stand to see anything suffer. I know you light up when you laugh, and you bite your lip when you're nervous, and you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. Victoria. Elena's resolve was crumbling. I know that 3 weeks ago, I was going through the motions of a life that felt empty, and now, I'm standing on a beach in paradise with the most incredible woman I've ever met, and I don't want to go back to empty. Victoria's forehead touched Elena's. I know that James Crawford can try to take my company, but he can't take this. He can't take you. Elena felt tears spilling over. What if I take the money and then disappear? What if this whole week really was just an act and you're making the biggest mistake of your life? Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile Elena had seen since the phone call. Then I'll have made the most beautiful mistake in history. But Elena, I don't think it's a mistake. I think you feel this too. Elena looked into Victoria's eyes, seeing her own emotions reflected there, fear, hope, desire, and something deeper that neither of them had dared to name yet. I do feel it, Elena whispered. I feel it so much it terrifies me. Victoria's lips were inches from Elena's when her phone rang again. James Crawford's name flashed on the screen, and Victoria's expression hardened. Don't answer it, Elena said quickly. I have to. If I don't fight him, I lose everything. Not everything, Elena said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. Victoria, what if we're each other's strength? What if together we're stronger than anything James Crawford can throw at us? Victoria stared at her phone as it continued to ring, then looked at Elena. For the first time since the crisis began, she smiled like she meant it. You know what? Victoria said, declining the call. James Crawford can wait until morning. Tonight I want to have dinner with my girlfriend and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. Is that what I am? Elena asked softly. Your girlfriend? Victoria's answer was to kiss her, soft and sweet and full of promise, as the Maldivian sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink around them. When they broke apart, Elena realized that somewhere between the business lunch and the beach confession, she'd stopped pretending entirely. 3 days later, Elena stood in the marble lobby of Sterling Media's Manhattan headquarters, wearing a power suit that Victoria had insisted she needed for what was about to unfold. The same lobby where, in another lifetime, she might have been, cleaning offices after hours. Now she was here as Victoria Sterling's partner in every sense of the word. You don't have to do this, Victoria said for the 10th time, adjusting Elena's collar with nervous fingers. James Crawford plays dirty, and I don't want you caught in the crossfire. Elena caught Victoria's hands and held them steady. We're stronger together, remember? Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't punch him in his smug face during the board meeting. Victoria laughed, despite her nerves. How did you know I was considering that? Because I've spent the last week learning to read your tells. Your left eye twitches when you want to hit something. Elena straightened Victoria's already perfect blazer. And because I might want to punch him too, for trying to hurt you. The elevator dinged, announcing the arrival of the Sterling Media board of directors, followed by James Crawford and his team of lawyers. Elena's first glimpse of Victoria's ex-fiancé confirmed everything she'd imagined. Tall, conventionally handsome, with the kind of calculated smile that never reached his eyes. "Victoria," James said smoothly, approaching with the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. "You look well. Paradise agreed with you, I see." "James." Victoria's voice was ice cold. "Still trying to steal what doesn't belong to you, I see." James's gaze shifted to Elena, his eyes appraising her like she was a business asset to be evaluated. "And you must be the mystery woman who's been keeping Victoria distracted during this crucial time. I'm James Crawford." Elena felt Victoria tense beside her, but she stepped forward with a smile that could have powered Times Square. "Elena Rosewood. And you must be the ex-fiancé who's so obsessed with Victoria that he spent 2 years trying to get her attention through corporate warfare." James's smooth expression flickered with surprise, and Elena heard several board members suppress chuckles behind them. "Shall we get started?" Victoria said, gesturing toward the boardroom. "I have a hostile takeover to crush." The next 2 hours were like watching a masterclass in corporate strategy. Victoria presented her company's financial health, growth projections, and expansion plans with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of an artist defending her masterpiece. Elena watched from the back of the room, marveling at this side of the woman she'd fallen in love with. James countered with promises of greater profits, expanded market share, and efficiency improvements that Elena could tell meant massive layoffs for people Victoria considered family. "The numbers don't lie," James concluded his presentation. "Sterling Media would be more profitable under Crawford Industries management. Shareholders deserve the highest possible returns." Victoria stood slowly, and Elena recognized the calm before the storm. "You're right, James, numbers don't lie, so let's talk about real numbers." Victoria clicked to her next slide, and Elena saw James's face pale. "These are Crawford Industries' actual retention rates, employee satisfaction scores, and long-term client relationships. What you're offering our shareholders is a short-term profit spike, followed by a long-term decline in everything that makes a media company sustainable. Furthermore," Victoria continued, her voice gaining strength, "I've spent the last week finalizing a partnership with the Nakamura Group that will expand Sterling Media into Asian markets with a projected 5-year growth rate of 400%, something Crawford Industries lacks the vision and international relationships to achieve." Elena felt pride swell in her chest as she watched the board members' expressions shift from skeptical to impressed. But James wasn't finished. "All very impressive," James said with a patronizing smile. "But can Sterling Media's leadership really be trusted when the CEO disappears for a week during a crisis to play vacation with her new friend?" The insult hung in the air like poison, and Elena saw Victoria's professional mask crack for just a moment. Before Victoria could respond, Elena stood up. "May I address that?" Elena asked, her voice carrying clearly through the boardroom. Victoria looked surprised but nodded. Elena walked to the front of the room, feeling every eye on her, and turned to face the board. "Mr. Crawford seems to think that taking time to maintain personal relationships is a weakness in leadership," Elena began. "I'd argue it's exactly the opposite. Victoria Sterling didn't disappear during a crisis. She secured the most important partnership in Sterling Media's history, while demonstrating that she's the kind of leader who understands that business. Success means nothing without the relationships that sustain it." Elena looked directly at James. "You see, Victoria's willingness to prioritize people alongside profits is a flaw, because you've never understood that the strongest leaders are those who inspire loyalty, not fear. The Nakamura Group chose to partner with Sterling Media specifically because they trust Victoria's character, not just her quarterly reports." Elena turned back to the board. "Sterling Media's employees don't just work for Victoria Sterling. They believe in her. Her clients don't just buy her services, they trust her vision. That's not something you can acquire through a hostile takeover, Mr. Crawford. That's something you earn." The boardroom was silent for a moment before the chairman, an elderly man named Robert Sterling, Victoria's uncle, began to applaud. The rest of the board joined him, and Elena saw James's carefully constructed confidence crumble. I believe we're ready to vote, Robert said. All in favor of rejecting Crawford? Industries takeover offer. Every hand in the room went up except James's and his lawyers. Motion carried unanimously, Robert announced. Mr. Crawford, I believe you know where the exit is. As James and his team filed out in defeat, Elena felt Victoria's arms wrap around her from behind. That was incredible, Victoria whispered in her ear. You just saved my company. We saved your company, Elena corrected, turning in Victoria's arms. Together. 6 months later, Elena stood in the same boardroom, but this time she was wearing a nameplate that read, Elena Rosewood, Director of Community Relations. Her mother's surgery had been successful, and she was now cancer-free and planning a visit to New York to meet the woman who'd changed her daughter's life. Ready for the Nakamura Group's quarterly review? Victoria asked, appearing in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee and a smile that still made Elena's heart skip. Ready for anything as long as you're there, Elena replied, accepting her coffee, and the kiss that came with it. Even ready for this? Victoria asked, pulling a small velvet box from her jacket pocket. Elena's coffee cup clattered to the table as she stared at the ring, a simple, elegant diamond that caught the light like captured starlight. Victoria Sterling, Elena said, her voice shaking with joy. Are you proposing to me in a boardroom? I'm proposing to you in the place where I realize that having everything means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with, Victoria said, dropping to one knee. Elena Rosewood, you walked into my life and reminded me what it means to be human. You taught me that the best partnerships aren't about merging assets, they're about merging hearts. Will you marry me? Elena looked at this incredible woman kneeling in front of her, offering not just a ring but a lifetime of adventures, challenges, and love beyond anything she'd ever dreamed possible. Yes, Elena said, laughing through her tears. Yes, but only if you promise me something. Anything, Victoria said, slipping the ring onto Elena's finger. Promise me that no matter how big the empire gets, no matter how many board meetings and business trips and hostile takeovers we face, we'll always remember that night on the beach when you chose me over James Crawford's phone call. Victoria stood and pulled Elena into her arms, kissing her with all the passion and promise of their future together. I promise. Besides, James Crawford is now running a failed consulting firm in Delaware. He's not exactly a threat to our happiness anymore. Elena laughed, spinning in Victoria's arms as the Manhattan skyline sparkled beyond the boardroom windows. So what's next for the Sterling Empire? Actually, Victoria said with a mischievous grin, I was thinking it might be time to change the name to Sterling Rosewood Enterprises. What do you think, partner? Elena's answer was another kiss, right there in the boardroom where their real love story had begun. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall on New York City, but inside Sterling Media's headquarters, Elena and Victoria had found their own private paradise, one built not on tropical beaches and crystal waters, but on trust, laughter, and the kind of love that conquers everything. The crystal chandelier trembled as Valentina Rossi slammed her palms against the mahogany desk, her dark eyes blazing with fury. Across from her, Maximilian Ashworth III sat with the composure of a man who had just ordered his morning espresso, not delivered a life-altering ultimatum to a woman whose world was crumbling around her. You're insane if you think I'll agree to this. Valentina's voice cut through the opulent silence of the Manhattan penthouse office, her Italian accent thickening with emotion. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds, oblivious to the drama unfolding 40 stories above. Maximilian adjusted his platinum cufflinks with deliberate precision, his steel-gray eyes never leaving her face. At 52, he possessed the kind of refined handsomeness that came with generations of good breeding and unlimited resources. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit impeccably tailored, and his smile, when he chose to use it, could have charmed the devil himself. Miss Rossi, he said, his voice carrying the weight of old money and older privilege, I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm presenting you with facts. Your father owes my family's investment firm $12 million. The art gallery he used, As collateral has been seized, his other assets liquidated. He has exactly 30 days to settle this debt or what? Valentina interrupted, though she already knew the answer that would change everything. Maximilian rose from his chair, moving to the window with the fluid grace of a predator. Or you will marry my son, Sebastian. The arrangement will satisfy the debt in full, and your father will be free to live out his remaining years without the burden of financial ruin. The silence that followed was deafening. Valentina stared at this man who spoke of her life as if it were a business transaction, her heart hammering against her ribs. At 34, she had built a successful career as a freelance art curator, traveled the world, and prided herself on her independence. The idea of an arranged marriage felt like being thrust back into the dark ages. "Your son," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The one you've hidden away from society for the past 20 years? For the first time, Maximilian's composure cracked. A shadow passed over his features, and when he turned back to face her, something raw and vulnerable flickered in his eyes before disappearing behind his mask of control. "Sebastian is different," he admitted, his voice softer now. "But he is my son, and he deserves happiness. You would be treated with the utmost respect, want for nothing, and live a lie for the rest of my life." Valentina's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Tell me, Mr. Ashworth, what exactly is wrong with your son that you're willing to buy him a wife instead of letting him find love naturally?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment Valentina saw something she hadn't expected in Maximilian's eyes: pain, deep parental pain that spoke of years of worry and protection. "Sebastian has the mental capacity of a 12-year-old, he said quietly. "He's gentle, kind, and deserves to know what it feels like to have someone care for him. Your father's debt gives me the opportunity to provide that for him." Valentina felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This wasn't just about money or power. This was about a father's desperate love for his child, and somehow that made it infinitely more complicated. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You have 24 hours. Maximilian returned to his desk, his businesslike demeanor sliding back into place like armor. "After that, I'll expect your answer. And Miss Rossi." He looked up at her, his gray eyes unreadable. "Choose wisely. Your father's life depends on it." As Valentina walked toward the elevator, her mind reeling, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into a story that would change, not just her life, but possibly her heart in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, carrying her away from the penthouse and toward a decision that would define her future. 24 hours felt like 24 minutes when your entire future hung in the balance. Valentina sat in her small but elegantly appointed apartment in Brooklyn, surrounded by art books and half-empty coffee cups, her laptop screen glowing with research about the Ashworth family. What she had discovered in the past few hours had shaken her assumptions about Maximilian and his mysterious son. The Ashworth fortune wasn't built on exploitation or corruption, as she had initially assumed. 3 generations ago, Maximilian's grandfather had started with a small investment firm that specialized in helping immigrant families build wealth in America. The family had maintained that tradition, quietly funding scholarships, art programs, and medical research. Maximilian himself had donated millions to autism research and special needs education, though he'd done so anonymously. But it was the photographs that truly surprised her. Hidden in old society pages and charity event coverage, she found images of a younger Maximilian with a woman of breathtaking beauty, Helena Ashworth, his late wife. The love between them was evident even in formal photographs, the way his hand rested protectively on her shoulder, how her eyes sparkled when she looked at him. Helena had died in a car accident when Sebastian was 5 years old. After that, the family had retreated from public life almost entirely. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Valentina opened it to find a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of white orchids and peonies, flowers she had mentioned loving during a conversation with a colleague months ago. The card was simple. "For your consideration, M.A." She was still staring at the flowers when her phone rang. Valentina? Her father's voice was weak, tired. I've been thinking about what we discussed yesterday. Giuseppe Rossi had been a respected art dealer in Venice before his gambling addiction had destroyed everything. The move to New York had been their fresh start, but old habits had followed. Him across the ocean. Valentina had known about his debts but not their true magnitude. "Papa, we'll find another way," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "There is no other way, mia cara. I have brought shame upon our family name, and now you must pay the price for my weakness." His voice broke. "But perhaps, this Ashworth man is not the monster we think him to be. I made some inquiries today." Valentina's eyebrows rose. "What kind of inquiries?" "I spoke with Marco Benedetti. You remember him, the gallery owner in Venice? He knows people who have done business with Ashworth Industries. They say Maximilian is tough but fair, that his word is his bond. And his son..." Giuseppe paused. "They say Sebastian is like a ray of sunshine, that everyone who meets him falls in love with his pure heart." The description didn't match the narrative Valentina had constructed in her mind. She had imagined Sebastian as either dangerous or completely incapacitated, not as someone described with such affection. "Papa, I can't marry someone I don't love, no matter how kind he might be." "I know, tesoro. But what if you could learn to care for him? What if this arrangement could become something more than a business transaction?" Before Valentina could respond, her laptop chimed with a new email. The sender made her heart skip. Sebastian Ashworth. The subject line read, "A letter from your maybe future husband, don't be scared." With trembling fingers, she opened it. "Dear Miss Valentina, that's a very pretty name. My dad told me he asked you to marry me. I hope I'm not too ugly or too weird for you. I know I'm different from other grown-ups, but I promise I'm very nice and I would never be mean to you. I like to paint pictures and I grow flowers in our garden. I also like to watch movies about adventures and eat ice cream. Strawberry is my favorite, but chocolate is good too. If you marry me, we could share ice cream, and maybe you could teach me about art, since Dad says you know lots about that. I don't really understand why someone as pretty as you, I saw your picture, would want to marry me, but Dad says sometimes good things happen when we least expect them. I hope you say yes, but if you say no, I won't be mad. Dad says I should always be a gentleman. Your friend, I hope, Sebastian P.S. I drew you a picture, but I don't know how to put it in the computer. Maybe I can show you later?" Tears pricked Valentina's eyes as she read the email. This wasn't what she had expected at all. Sebastian's innocence and genuine kindness shone through every word, making her feel like a fraud for even considering this arrangement as anything other than what it was. A chance to help two people who needed her. But was she prepared to sacrifice her dreams of finding true love for duty and compassion? The answer, she realized, might not be as simple as she had initially thought. The Ashworth estate in the Hamptons looked like something out of a European fairy tale, complete with manicured gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the ocean. Valentina sat in the passenger seat of Maximilian's sleek Tesla, her palms damp with nervousness as they wound up the circular driveway lined with ancient oak trees. "He's probably watching from his window," Maximilian said softly, glancing up at the second floor of the Georgian mansion. "Sebastian has been excited about meeting you for 3 days. Mrs. Chen, our housekeeper, says he's changed his shirt 4 times this morning." Despite her anxiety, Valentina found herself smiling. "Does he know why I'm here? I mean, does he understand the arrangement?" Maximilian's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "He knows I've asked you to consider marrying him. In his mind, it's rather like a fairy tale, the beautiful princess who might choose to love the lonely prince." He paused. Sebastian sees the world in very simple terms: good and bad, happy and sad, love and loneliness. He doesn't understand the complexities that adults create. They pulled up to the front entrance where a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and graying hair waited on the steps. Mrs. Chen, Valentina presumed, but it was the figure bouncing excitedly behind her that captured Valentina's attention. Sebastian Ashworth was nothing like she had imagined. Tall like his father, with the same strong jawline and thick dark hair, he possessed a boyish handsomeness that was enhanced rather than diminished by his bright, guileless smile. He wore khakis and a crisp blue button-down shirt, and in his hands he clutched what appeared to be a hand-drawn picture. "She's here, she's here," Sebastian called out, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of a child on Christmas morning. "Dad, she's even prettier than her photo." Maximilian shot Valentina an apologetic look. "Sebastian doesn't really understand social filters," he murmured. As they approached the front steps, Sebastian bounded forward with the unself-conscious joy of a golden retriever. "Miss Valentina, I made you a picture." He thrust the drawing toward her with such enthusiasm that he nearly tripped over his own feet. Maximilian reached out automatically to steady his son, and Valentina caught a glimpse of something she hadn't expected to see. Pure, unconditional love in the older man's eyes as he looked at Sebastian. It transformed his entire face, softening the sharp edges of his features and revealing the devoted father beneath the billionaire exterior. "Sebastian, remember what we practiced about personal space," Maximilian said gently. "Oh, right." Sebastian took a large step backward and extended the drawing more formally. "Miss Valentina, I would be honored if you would accept this humble gift." The formality of the words, clearly rehearsed, contrasted so charmingly with his obvious excitement that Valentina couldn't help but laugh. The drawing was surprisingly skilled. A garden scene with two figures sitting on a bench surrounded by flowers. One had long dark hair like hers. The other looked unmistakably like Sebastian. "It's beautiful, Sebastian. You're very talented." His face lit up like sunrise. "Really? Dad, she likes it. She thinks I'm talented." He turned back to Valentina with undisguised adoration. "Would you like to see my real garden? I grow all kinds of flowers, and I have a special section just for herbs that Mrs. Chen uses for cooking." "I'd love to," Valentina said, surprising herself with her sincerity. As Sebastian led them around the side of the house, chattering excitedly about soil conditions and proper watering techniques, Valentina found herself walking beside Maximilian. She could feel his tension, his careful observation of her every reaction to his son. "He's wonderful," she said quietly, and meant it. Maximilian's step faltered slightly. "You're not just being polite?" "No, I'm not." She stopped walking, forcing him to face her. "But I need to know something. This arrangement, is it really about Sebastian's happiness? Or is it about easing your guilt about his condition?" The question hit its mark. Maximilian's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might deflect or deny. Instead, he surprised her with honesty. "Both," he admitted. "Sebastian asks me sometimes why he doesn't have a girlfriend like the people on TV. He wonders if there's something wrong with him that makes women not want to be around him. And every time he asks, it breaks my heart a little more." They had reached Sebastian's garden, and Valentina gasped despite herself. It was extraordinary. Not just beautiful, but thoughtfully designed with sections for different types of plants, each area showing evidence of careful planning and devoted attention. "Sebastian, this is incredible. How did you learn to do all this?" "Books mostly, and YouTube videos. Dad got me a subscription to Garden and Gun magazine, and Mrs. Chen helps me with the harder words." Sebastian beamed with pride. "Would you like to help me plant some new bulbs? We could plant them together, and then when they bloom in the spring, we could have a celebration." The hope in his voice was so pure, so unguarded, that Valentina felt something crack open in her chest. This wasn't the burden she had imagined. Sebastian wasn't asking her to sacrifice her life. He was offering to share his joy with her. "I think I'd like that very much," she heard herself say. From the corner of her eye, she saw Maximilian's sharp intake of breath, saw his hands clench, and then relax at his sides. When she glanced at him, the gratitude in his expression was so raw, so vulnerable that she had to look away. What was happening to her carefully constructed defenses? And why did the idea of staying in this beautiful place with these two unexpected men suddenly feel less like a prison and more like coming home. 3 weeks later, Valentina found herself standing in front of a mirror in what would soon become her bedroom at the Ashworth estate, adjusting the simple cream-colored dress she had chosen for the private ceremony. The decision to accept Maximilian's proposal had surprised everyone, including herself. What had started as a desperate measure to save her father had evolved into something she couldn't quite name, but felt surprisingly right. The transformation hadn't been immediate. After that first meeting with Sebastian, she had returned to her Brooklyn apartment in a state of emotional turmoil. The sweet, genuine young man she had met bore no resemblance to the burden she had imagined. His joy was infectious, his kindness authentic, and his artistic talent genuinely impressive. But it was Maximilian who had truly shaken her world. Over the past 3 weeks, as they had worked out the practical details of their arrangement, she had discovered layers to the man that contradicted everything she had initially believed about him. Yes, he was wealthy and powerful, but he wielded that power with surprising gentleness. He had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that was so generous to her that her lawyer had asked twice if she was certain she had read it correctly. If the marriage ended for any reason, she would be financially secure for life. More importantly, he had given her complete autonomy over how she wanted to structure her relationship with Sebastian. No expectations, no demands, just the request that she be kind to his son. "Miss Valentina?" Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Mr. Sebastian is asking for you. He has something he wants to give you before the ceremony." Valentina found Sebastian in the sunroom, pacing back and forth with nervous energy. He had been fitted for a new suit for the occasion, navy blue with a silver tie that brought out his eyes, and he looked handsome enough to make any woman's heart flutter. The thought surprised her with its honesty. "Sebastian," Mrs. Chen said, "you wanted to see me." He spun around, his face lighting up before immediately clouding with worry. "Valentina, you look so beautiful, but are you sure you want to marry me? I mean, really sure?" Because Mrs. Chen explained that sometimes people change their minds about big decisions, and I would understand if you wanted to run away and marry someone who isn't different like me. The vulnerability in his voice made her chest tighten. She crossed the room and took his hands in hers, surprised by their steadiness and warmth. "Sebastian, look at me," she said softly. "I'm not running anywhere. I'm here because I want to be here, with you." It wasn't entirely true yet, but it wasn't entirely false either. Somewhere over the past 3 weeks, her feelings had shifted from reluctant acceptance to genuine affection. Sebastian's pure heart and infectious enthusiasm had worn down her defenses, and she found herself looking forward to their daily conversations about art, gardening, and his dreams of traveling to Italy to see the gardens of Via d'Este. "Really?" His smile could have powered the entire estate. "Because I have something for you. I made it myself with help from Mrs. Chen and that jewelry man from the city that Dad knows." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, his hands shaking, slightly with excitement. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with tiny charms, a paintbrush, a flower, a small map of Italy, and in the center, a heart engraved with both their initials. "Each charm represents something about you that I like," Sebastian explained earnestly. "The paintbrush because you know so much about art, the flower because you said you love my garden, Italy, because that's where you're from, and the heart because I hope someday you might care about me the way people in movies care, about each other." Tears pricked Valentina's eyes as she looked at the bracelet. The craftsmanship was simple but thoughtful, each charm carefully chosen and placed. It was more personal and meaningful than any expensive jewelry she had ever received. "Sebastian, it's perfect. Will you help me put it on?" As he fumbled with the delicate clasp, his tongue poking out in concentration, Valentina realized that her feelings for this sweet, uncomplicated man were already deeper than she had admitted to herself. Not romantic love, not yet, but something warm and protective that could grow into love given time. "There." Sebastian stepped back proudly. "Now you'll always have a piece of me with you, even when I'm not around." A soft clearing of a throat made them both turn. Maximilian stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that emphasized his distinguished silver temples. But it was his expression that caught Valentina's attention, a mixture of gratitude, tenderness, and something else she couldn't quite identify. "The justice of the peace has arrived," he said quietly. "Are you both ready?" Sebastian nodded enthusiastically, but Valentina found herself studying Maximilian's face. Over the past 3 weeks, she had begun to notice things about him that had nothing to do with his wealth or status. The way he absently massaged his left shoulder when he was tired from long days at the office. How he always checked to make sure Sebastian had taken his vitamins before bed. The fact that he kept a photo of his late wife in his office, but turned it face down when he thought no one was looking, as if the grief was still too sharp to bear. "Maximilian," she said impulsively, "are you all right with this? Really all right? Because if you have any doubts..." Something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps, that she was thinking of his feelings at this moment. "My feelings are irrelevant," he said carefully. "This is about Sebastian's happiness." But as they walked toward the living room, where the ceremony would take place, Valentina couldn't shake the feeling that Maximilian's feelings were more relevant than anyone was willing to admit. The ceremony itself was simple and brief. Sebastian beamed throughout, occasionally squeezing Valentina's hand as if to reassure himself that she was really there. Maximilian served as witness, his expression carefully neutral except for the moments when he looked at his son, and then his love was unmistakable. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Sebastian's kiss was gentle and brief, clearly rehearsed with Mrs. Chen, and his joy was so radiant that even the officiant smiled. "We're married," Sebastian announced to the room at large. "Valentina is my wife now, isn't that wonderful, Dad?" "Yes, son," Maximilian said quietly, his eyes meeting Valentina's over Sebastian's head. "It's wonderful." But as they celebrated with champagne and Mrs. Chen's extraordinary Italian cookies, Valentina found herself watching the interplay between father and son, and wondering why she felt as though she had just stepped into a story that was more complicated than anyone had told her. The evening ended with Sebastian proudly showing her to their room, which turned out to be a beautiful suite with 2 separate bedrooms connected by a sitting area. Maximilian, it seemed, had thought of everything. "This is your space," Sebastian explained solemnly, "and this is mine. Dad said married people need privacy sometimes, but I hope we can have breakfast together every morning and maybe watch movies on Sunday afternoons." "I'd like that very much," Valentina assured him. After Sebastian had gone to bed, she found herself alone in her new room, looking out at the gardens where Sebastian had first shown her his flowers. The bracelet caught the moonlight, its charms glinting softly. What had she gotten herself into? More importantly, why did she find herself thinking not just about her new husband's sweet smile, but about the complicated man who was now her father-in-law, and the way he had looked at her when he thought no one was watching? 2 months into her marriage, Valentina discovered that living with the Ashworth men was like being part of an intricate dance where everyone knew the steps except her. Sebastian had settled into married life with the enthusiasm he brought to everything else, treating each day as a new adventure to share with his wife. Maximilian, however, had become increasingly elusive, working longer hours and taking more business trips than seemed strictly necessary. It was during one of these trips, Maximilian was in Dubai for a week, that Valentina truly began to understand the complexity of her new family dynamics. "Valentina, will you help me with something?" Sebastian asked one morning over breakfast, his usual bright demeanor dimmed with worry. "It's about Dad." She set down her coffee cup, giving him her full attention. Over the past weeks, she had learned to read Sebastian's moods with surprising accuracy. His emotional transparency was both refreshing and heartbreaking. When he was happy, it filled the room. When he was troubled, it was impossible to ignore. "What about your father?" "He's been sad lately. Not regular sad, but the deep kind that he tries to hide." Sebastian picked at his scrambled eggs, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Mrs. Chen thinks it's because of Mom's birthday coming up. It would have been her 50th birthday next week." Valentina felt something twist in her chest. In all their practical discussions about the marriage arrangement, Maximilian had never mentioned his late wife's birthday. She realized how little she actually knew about the man who had orchestrated this entire situation. "Tell me about your mother, Sebastian." His face brightened immediately. "Mom was the most beautiful person in the whole world. She had long blonde hair that smelled like flowers, and she used to sing to me every night before bed. She taught me how to paint, and she made the best chocolate chip cookies, and she always knew exactly what to say when I was scared or sad." Sebastian jumped up from the table with sudden energy. "Do you want to see her art studio? Dad keeps it exactly the way she left it. He goes there sometimes when he thinks no one will notice, but I always know because he comes out with red eyes." The art studio was on the 3rd floor of the house in what had once been a converted attic space. When Sebastian opened the door, Valentina gasped. The room was flooded with natural light from skylights and dormer windows, and every surface was covered with Helena's artwork. Paintings lined the walls, landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces that spoke of joy and passion and deep emotional intelligence. But it was the unfinished canvas on the easel that made Valentina's heart clench. It was a family portrait. Maximilian, younger and less guarded, Helena radiant with happiness, and 5-year-old Sebastian between them, his face bright with innocent joy. "She was working on it when she died," Sebastian said quietly. "Dad tried to have someone else finish it, but he said no one could capture Mom's vision." Valentina moved closer to the painting, studying Helena's technique. She was extraordinarily talented, not just technically skilled, but emotionally perceptive. The way she had painted Maximilian showed a man completely at peace, his love for his family evident in every brushstroke. "Sebastian," Valentina said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. "How would you feel about finishing this painting? Together, I mean, as a surprise for your father's birthday next month?" Sebastian's eyes widened. "Could we really do that? But what if we mess it up? What if Dad gets angry?" "We won't mess it up," Valentina assured him, though her heart was racing at the audacity of what she was suggesting. "And I don't think your father would be angry. I think it might help him heal." They spent the next week working on the painting every afternoon while Maximilian was at the office. Valentina guided Sebastian's hand as they carefully added details to the unfinished sections, blending colors and adding subtle touches that honored Helena's original vision while incorporating their own artistic interpretation. Working so closely together, Valentina began to see new depths in Sebastian. His artistic instincts were remarkably sophisticated, and his emotional intelligence, while expressed simply, was profound. He noticed things about people that others missed, the way Mrs. Chen hummed when she was particularly happy, how the gardener always whistled the same tune when he was worried about the weather, and especially how his father's grief manifested in small, subtle ways. "Dad doesn't think I notice when he's sad about Mom," Sebastian confided one afternoon as they worked on the background details. "But I always know. He gets very quiet and he forgets to eat lunch, and sometimes I catch him looking at nothing, with this expression like he's lost." "Do you miss her too?" Valentina asked gently. "Every day," Sebastian admitted. "But it's different now than it used to be. When I was little, I missed her so much it felt like my chest was going to break open. Now I miss her, but I also remember how happy she made me feel, and that makes the missing hurt less." His simple wisdom struck Valentina with unexpected force. This young man, whom society might dismiss as limited, had found a way to transform grief into gratitude, something many adults never managed to achieve. It was during their 4th afternoon of painting that Maximilian came home unexpectedly early from his Dubai trip. They were so absorbed in their work that they didn't hear his footsteps on the stairs until he was standing in the doorway. "What are you doing in here?" His voice was sharp, controlled, but Valentina caught the undercurrent of pain. She turned to face him, paintbrush still in her hand, and saw something she hadn't expected. Not anger, but vulnerability so raw it made her breath catch. "Dad!" Sebastian jumped up, paint on his fingers and excitement in his voice. "We're finishing Mom's painting. Valentina said we could do it together as a surprise for your birthday, but I guess it's not a surprise anymore." His face fell slightly. "Are you angry?" Maximilian stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the canvas. The painting was nearly complete now, and Valentina could see him taking in every detail. The way they had carefully preserved Helena's style while adding their own subtle touches, the love and care evident in every brushstroke. "You captured her technique perfectly," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you know to use those particular color combinations for the shadows?" "Mom taught me about shadows before she died," Sebastian said proudly. "She said shadows aren't just dark. They have colors hiding in them if you know how to look. And Valentina helped me remember exactly what Mom showed me." Maximilian stepped into the room, moving toward the painting like a man in a trance. When he reached the easel, he stood there for a long moment, just staring. "She would have loved this," he said finally. "She would have loved that you finished it together." Something in his tone made Valentina look at him more closely. The careful control he usually maintained was slipping, and she could see the grief he worked so hard to hide. "Maximilian," she said softly, "are you all right?" He turned to look at her then, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip. Not just gratitude, but something deeper, more complicated. Something that had nothing to do with Sebastian and everything to do with the way she had cared for his son, the way she had honored his wife's memory, the way she had somehow found a place in their carefully guarded world. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice was rough with emotion. "Thank you, both of you. This means more than you could possibly know." But as he turned to leave the room, Valentina caught sight of his reflection in one of the windows, and she saw him raise his hand to his eyes. The gesture was so private, so vulnerable that she had to look away. That evening, after Sebastian had gone to bed, Valentina found herself in the garden where she and Sebastian had first planted bulbs together. The flowers were beginning to bloom now, creating splashes of color in the moonlit darkness. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Maximilian approach until he was standing beside her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked quietly. "Too much on my mind," she admitted. "I hope we didn't overstep today with the painting. Sebastian just wanted to do something special for you, and I thought—" "You thought correctly," Maximilian interrupted. "What you did today. It was exactly what Helena would have wanted. She always believed that love was meant to be shared, not hoarded." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both looking out at Sebastian's carefully tended garden. Finally, Maximilian spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" Valentina nodded. "Are you happy? I mean truly happy with this arrangement? Because if you're not, if you ever want to leave, I want you to know that you can. The financial terms of our agreement will remain the same regardless." The question surprised her. "Why are you asking?" "Because I've been watching you with Sebastian and I can see that your feelings for him are genuine. But I also see the way you look sometimes when you think no one is watching. Like you're wondering what your life might have been like if you had made different choices." His perceptiveness startled her. It was true that she sometimes wondered about the path not taken, but those moments were becoming less frequent as her affection for Sebastian deepened and her appreciation for the unique life they were building together grew. "I won't lie and say I never think about other possibilities," she said carefully. "But I'm not unhappy, Maximilian. Sebastian brings joy to every day in this life we're building. It's not what I planned, but it's not without its rewards." "And what about you?" she asked impulsively. "Are you happy with how this arrangement has worked out?" Something flickered across his features, surprise perhaps that she had thought to ask about his feelings. "Sebastian is happier than I've seen him since Helena died. That's all that matters to me." But even as he said the words, Valentina caught something in his tone that suggested there was more to his feelings than he was willing to admit. The thought should have been unsettling, but instead, she found herself curious about the depths this complicated man kept hidden beneath his controlled exterior. As they walked back toward the house together, Valentina found herself acutely aware of Maximilian's presence beside her. The way he moved with quiet confidence, the subtle scent of his cologne, the careful distance he maintained between them even as they walked the same path. What was happening to her carefully ordered new life? And why did she find herself hoping that whatever it was, it would continue to unfold? The revelation came on a rainy Thursday morning in late spring, 6 months after Valentina had become Mrs. Sebastian Ashworth. She was in Helena's art studio, now transformed into her own workspace, when she overheard a conversation that would change everything she thought she understood about her marriage and the two men who had become the center of her world. Sebastian was downstairs in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen, his voice carrying clearly through the old house's thin walls. What she heard made her sink into the window seat, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Mrs. Chen, can I tell you a secret? A really big secret that I've never told anyone, not even Dad?" "Of course, sweet boy, you know you can tell me anything. I know Valentina doesn't love me the way wives are supposed to love husbands in movies. Not the romantic kind of love." Sebastian's voice was matter-of-fact, without a trace of sadness. "But that's okay, because I don't love her that way either. I love her like the best friend I always wanted, or maybe like a sister who actually likes spending time with me." Valentina's breath caught. How had Sebastian, with his childlike worldview, seen so clearly what she had been struggling to understand about her own feelings? "But here's the really big secret," Sebastian continued, and she could hear the excitement building in his voice. "I think Dad loves her. Really loves her. Not just grateful, loves her for being nice to me. I see how he looks at her when she's not paying attention, and it's the same way he used to look at Mom, except sadder because he thinks he can't have her." "Oh, Sebastian." Mrs. Chen's voice was gentle. "What makes you think that?" "Lots of things. Like how he always asks me extra questions about what Valentina and I did during the day. But he tries to make it sound casual, and how he bought those art books for the library. The ones about Italian Renaissance painters, even though he doesn't read art books. And remember last week when Valentina got sick with that flu? Dad stayed home from work for 2 days, but he told everyone it was because I might catch it. But I think it was really because he was worried about her." Mrs. Chen made a soft sound that might have been understanding or sympathy. "And the biggest clue," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "is that sometimes I catch him standing outside the art studio when Valentina is working, just listening to her humming. He gets this look on his face like he's in physical pain, but good pain, if that makes sense." It made perfect sense to Valentina, because she had been feeling something similar every time she caught glimpses of Maximilian's unguarded moments, when he laughed at Sebastian's jokes, when he absently fixed a flower arrangement that had gone askew, when he stood in the garden at sunset looking like a man carrying the weight of impossible dreams. "What are you going to do about this secret knowledge?" Mrs. Chen asked. Sebastian's answer was swift and decisive. "I'm going to fix it, of course, because Valentina makes Dad happy and Dad makes Valentina happy, even if they don't know it yet. And I want the people I love most to be happy together." Valentina pressed her hand to her mouth, torn between laughter and tears. Sebastian, in his beautiful simplicity, had cut straight through all the complex emotional walls they had built, and seen the truth that none of them had been brave enough to acknowledge. She was in love with Maximilian Ashworth. The realization hit her with the force of a revelation that had been building for months. She loved his quiet strength, his devotion to Sebastian, the way his eyes softened when he looked at his son's artwork. She loved his hidden vulnerability, his dry sense of humor that emerged during their rare private conversations, and yes, the way he tried so hard to maintain distance between them, even as his careful control slipped in small, telling moments. But how could she act on these feelings when doing so might destroy the fragile happiness Sebastian had found? How could she risk the delicate balance they had achieved? The answer came that very evening, in the form of Sebastian's characteristically direct approach to problem-solving. Maximilian had returned from the office later than usual, looking tired and slightly rumpled. Sebastian bounded up to him with his usual enthusiasm, but instead of launching into his typical recounting of the day's events, he planted himself directly in front of his father with a determined expression. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something very important." Maximilian loosened his tie, giving Sebastian his full attention. "What is it, son?" "I want to give Valentina a divorce." The words hit the room like a thunderclap, Maximilian went very still, and Valentina, who had been reading nearby, felt the book slip from her suddenly nerveless fingers. "Sebastian," Maximilian's voice was carefully controlled. "What brought this on? Has Valentina said something to make you think she's unhappy?" "No, Dad, you're not understanding." Sebastian's tone was patient, as if he were explaining something obvious to a particularly slow child. "I want to give her a divorce so she can marry you instead." The silence that followed was deafening. Valentina could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of two pairs of eyes, one confused and hopeful, the other shocked and carefully blank. "Sebastian," Maximilian said slowly, "marriage doesn't work that way. And besides, Valentina is happy being married to you. She's happy being our family," Sebastian corrected. "But she's not happy being my wife. We're like really good friends who live in the same house, which is wonderful, don't get me wrong, but it's not fair to her to pretend it's something it's not." Sebastian turned to Valentina, his expression earnest and loving. "Valentina, you know I love you, right? You're the best thing that happened to our family since Mom died. But I see how you look at Dad when you think no one is watching, and I see how he looks at you, and it makes me sad that you're both pretending not to love each other because of me." Valentina found her voice, though it came out shakier than she intended. "Sebastian, sweetheart, it's more complicated than that." "No, it's not," Sebastian said with absolute certainty. "Love isn't complicated. People make it complicated with all their grown-up rules and worries, but love itself is simple. You love Dad, he loves you, and I love both of you. So why can't we just rearrange things so everyone gets what they want?" Maximilian had gone very pale. "Sebastian, you can't just decide to divorce your wife because you think she'd be happier with someone else. And you certainly can't decide that for me." "But Dad," Sebastian said, his voice growing more animated, "don't you want to be happy? Really, truly happy, not just content? Because I can see that you're not. You're better than you were before Valentina came. But you're still carrying around all this sadness that you don't have to carry." He moved to his father, taking his hands, with the same earnest affection he had shown Valentina on their wedding day. "Mom wouldn't want you to be lonely forever. She told me once when I was little and asked her what would happen if she ever went to heaven, that love doesn't run out when you use it. She said the heart gets bigger to hold more love, not smaller." Maximilian's composure finally cracked. Valentina saw his eyes fill with tears he couldn't quite suppress. "Sebastian, you don't understand. I would never take your wife away from you." "You're not taking me away from anyone," Valentina said quietly, finally finding the courage to speak the truth that had been growing in her heart for months. "Sebastian is right. We've all been pretending this is something it isn't." Both men turned to look at her, and she took a shaky breath before continuing. "Sebastian, you are one of the most wonderful people I've ever known. You're kind and talented, and you see beauty in everything. I love you deeply, but you're right. I love you like family, not like a husband. And you?" She turned to Maximilian, her heart racing. "You've been trying so hard to stay distant, to maintain proper boundaries, that you've been making yourself miserable. And frankly, making me miserable too, because I've fallen completely in love with you and haven't been able to do anything about it." The admission hung in the air between them. Maximilian stared at her with an expression of wonder and disbelief, as if she had just told him the sun had decided to rise in the west. "You're in love with me?" he said finally. "Desperately," Valentina confirmed, surprised by how good it felt to finally say it out loud. "Which is terribly inconvenient given that I'm married to your son, but there it is." Sebastian clapped his hands together with delight. "See? I told you. Now we just need to figure out the practical stuff." It turned out that the practical stuff was more straightforward than any of them had imagined. Sebastian's desire for the divorce was genuine and legally sufficient. More importantly, he had a plan for his own future that surprised them both. "There's this woman, Maria, who works at the art therapy center where I volunteer," Sebastian explained later that evening as they sat in the garden, working through the details of their unconventional situation. "She's really nice, and she thinks I'm funny, and she doesn't treat me like I'm broken or different." We've been friends for months, and I think maybe I could ask her on a real date if I wasn't married." "Sebastian," Valentina said gently, "why didn't you tell us about Maria before?" He shrugged, suddenly shy. "Because I thought being married was more important than what I wanted. But if we're all going to be honest about our feelings, then I should be honest too. I'd like a chance to see if Maria might want to be my girlfriend. For real. Not just my friend who happens to be a girl." Maximilian reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. "I think that sounds wonderful, Sebastian. And I think Maria would be lucky to have you." 6 months later, Valentina stood in the same garden where she had first met Sebastian, wearing a different dress for a very different wedding. This time, the ceremony was larger. Giuseppe had flown in from Italy, along with several of Valentina's cousins. Maria was there too, radiant in a blue dress that matched her eyes, holding Sebastian's hand as he proudly introduced her to everyone as my girlfriend, who might say yes if I ask her to marry me someday. Maximilian's vows were nothing like the businesslike words that had marked her first wedding. He spoke of unexpected love, of second chances, of the way Valentina had brought light back into corners of his heart he had thought were permanently darkened. His voice shook when he promised to love her with the same devotion he had once given Helena, but differently, because love wasn't about replacing what was lost, but about creating something new. Valentina's own vows were equally emotional, but she managed to make it through them without crying until she got to the part about Sebastian. "I also want to thank my first husband," she said, smiling at Sebastian through her tears, "for being wise enough to see what the rest of us were too scared to acknowledge, and brave enough to fight for everyone's happiness, even when it meant letting go of something safe and comfortable." Sebastian beamed at her from the front row, his arms wrapped around Maria, who was crying happy tears of her own. As Maximilian kissed her, their first real kiss full of promise and passion and the joy of finally allowing themselves to want what they had been denying for so long, Valentina thought about the strange journey that had brought them all to this moment. She had come to this family as a desperate woman trying to save her father from financial ruin. She was leaving as a woman who had found not just love, but the kind of deep, complicated, beautiful family bonds that couldn't be bought or arranged, only discovered, nurtured, and cherished. The reception was held in the same sunroom where Sebastian had first given her the bracelet she still wore every day. The bracelet had new charms now: a wedding ring, a paintbrush crossed with a fountain pen, representing her new art consulting business, and a tiny heart engraved with an M. "No regrets?" Maximilian murmured in her ear as they swayed together during their first dance. "Only one," Valentina said, smiling up at the man who had become her whole world. "I regret that it took us so long to stop being afraid of what we wanted." "Well," Maximilian said, spinning her gently as Sebastian and Maria danced nearby, both of them laughing at something that was probably only funny to them. "We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." And as the evening light streamed through the windows of the house that had become her home, Valentina thought that sounded like the most perfect plan in the world.